reality is this. Ntcl operates in probably one of the most extreme shipping environments in the world. Mother Nature decides when it starts, and Mother Nature decides when it ends.
You know, these guys are running boats and barges, not just in water, but they're doing it in ice. And the water's going over the barges, and the water's freezing, and the barges are sinking deeper, and they're doing it in water that's sort of uncharted and constantly changing.
The people that it's characterized this company have been adventurers, entrepreneurs. One of the key philosophies for Ntcl, people don't only look at the challenges, but they create them and turn them into opportunities. Those opportunities are based on their expertise and knowledge, but they're also based on their commitment to successfully completing operations that a lot of people would shy away from. Today, we're a well-established company. We can deliver anywhere at any time.
Obviously, if you've been there 75 years, you've done a damn good job of it.
So how did we get here? And what did it take? To really understand, we need to go back in time to our humble beginning. 75 years ago, the world was a very different place. It was in the depths of the Great Depression. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and the Chinese Communists began their long march. While in Canada's far north, the discovery of radium at Great Bear Lake sparked a rush to the Northwest Territories. Cy Becker and Carl Murdoff recognized an opportunity as the uranium concentrates needed to make the long journey from Port Radium to Waterways, Alberta. A few years later, White Eagle Mines, operating on the shore of Great Bear Lake, purchased the company from Becker and Murdoff. Northern Transportation Company Limited was born.
And 75 years is an awful long life in terms of a company. And we were an essential part of the development of the Northwest Territories.
By 1936, faced with mounting operational costs and an unforgiving environment, they sold the company to Eldorado Mines for the princely sum of $87,000. At that time, the most dominant player on the rivers was Mackenzie River Transport, owned by Hudson's Bay Company. They controlled a key stretch of river between Fort Fitzgerald and Fort Smith, and in 1936 refused access to all other companies. With its lifeline choked off, Ntcl portaged its fleet to keep the supply lines moving. But competition was still fierce at the Waterways railhead. Any unmarked items were free for the taking, so tempers flared and contracts were broken. By the end of the 1930s, Eldorado closed its radium mine, Yellowknife its gold mine, and the country went to war. This devastated transportation companies working the rivers. But in 1942, hope resurfaced for Ntcl. The Canadian and U.S. governments began construction of the Canal Pipeline to supply the war effort from the Norman Wells oil fields. Ntcl was selected to deliver the essential project supplies. It also shipped uranium destined for the Manhattan Project.
The company was moving uranium from Great Bear Lake across the lake to Franklin and then down the Bear River. It was a backhaul into Bell Rock, into Fort Smith, over the portage back into McMurray and shipped out of McMurray down into Ontario.
This was an epic journey through very challenging waters. But Ntcl's skippers had an uncanny sense on the rivers.
All of the skippers could read water.
Well, to read water, you have to be able to judge the currents and know the boils in the river and which way it's probably going to go for the deepest water. It's something that's hard to explain. If you have the knowledge, you actually know it. But if you don't, it's really hard to get. Those channels change every week.
Just shifting sands, that's all. It just keeps moving. It's not a fast-moving river, so you wouldn't think it would shift that much, but it does. Like when you get high water, everything flattens out, you know? And then if it drops fast, now you really got to start looking because it hasn't even had a chance yet to cut a hole somewhere, you know?
But you want to check it to see just how deep it is. We didn't have sounders then, and we'd have somebody out sounding and somebody signaling back to the wheelhouse how deep the water was. And that's the way we did our channel searching.
Maybe we come back next time, it's going to be different because it's cut a channel somewhere else.
When you're a captain, you don't sleep that good, let me tell you.
Back then, work on the boats was a little different.
Well, you work 6 hours on and 6 hours off. And if you got stuck on a sandbar, you might work for 30 hours or whatever. There was no overtime, no nothing those days. You just kept right on working until they told you could go to bed.
Like today, delivering the cargo was just one of many challenges in a season at Ntcl.
Well, I think the fall of the year when you get snow and slush and ice and slippery and that kind of thing is probably about the worst you're going to get.
When you got everything delivered, I mean, you let out a huge sigh of relief because you'd done your job. You knew that, okay, we're finished. We got everything delivered. And then the boats would begin to come home. And that used to be the longest month of the year because between Inuvik and Hay River, which is almost 1,000 miles, there's no place to hide. Like, you can't say, okay, we're finished, we'll just tie up here. Because if you did that, the spring comes, that boat would be gone and all the barges would be gone.
But again, it does happen. I mean, it does get done. It just takes longer, that's all.
There was always one key ingredient in a successful season.
Oh, I'll tell you, the cook is the most important person on the boat. So if it's grumpy and not very good, well, the whole crew gets upside down. If you got a good cook, everything runs smooth.
You know, when the boat came into a community, it was a big day. School was canceled. You know, I mean, the boat comes in once a year. Everybody was down at the dock and everybody was unloading the containers.
It was a mixture of everything, you know, the construction material and that sort of stuff, the groceries and all the consumables. And fuel, of course.
And it needed to, because remote communities were counting on them. And sometimes Ntcl was asked to move some pretty unusual cargo.
In 1 year, we had a contract to move 27 horses from Hay River to Norman Wells for some outfitting company in Norman Wells.
The Government of Canada recognized Ntcl was an indispensable northern supply link for communities and resource exploration. So in 1949, it bought the company and formed a Crown corporation.
So we were sort of an anomaly, I think, in Ottawa, in that we were what they called a Schedule D Crown Corporation. And a Schedule D Crown Corporation was supposed to make money. It wasn't supposed to be just given grants to run. It was hopefully would make some money. And we were fortunate in that way, in that we were always managed to turn a profit.
In the post-war years, the race for uranium began in the Athabasca region. And again, Ntcl competed with its old nemesis, Mackenzie River Transport. Ultimately, Ntcl prevailed and purchased the company and its vessels to maintain and expand its market share.
Then in the late 50s, all of a sudden they're going to build a DuLine site.
And that was a huge, huge contract received from the United States Air Force. So there was a lot of construction material.
And for years held a contract to deliver fuel and supplies to all of the sites.
The Radium Do, the newest member of Ntcl's fleet, serviced sites stretching from Alaska to Baffin Island. And as a gift for Ntcl's reliable service, the United States Navy gave 3 Arctic oil and gas tankers and 3 landing ships to the company. In 1959, Ntcl moved its operations to Hay River on the south shore of Great Slave Lake.
The railroad come through, and then the cargo started to move in.
And from 1969 to 1972, it expanded its operations to include a 45-hectare shipyard, a synchro-lift facility, and a 25-hectare loading terminal. This gave Ntcl the largest inland port on the continent and northernmost railhead. The new decade began with the closing of the Port Radium mine on Great Bear Lake. Exploration on Lake Athabasca slowed, forcing Ntcl to retire many vessels and barges. But a few years later, Yellowknife Transportation, a longtime rival, proposed selling its assets. When negotiations were finalized, Ntcl had acquired 10 tugs and numerous barges.
It was quite an addition to the fleet. So basically, I suppose in those days we were a monopoly, but we didn't operate like a monopoly. We operated like we took on something, we delivered it.
Seismic surveys for oil and gas companies were also conducted in the 1950s as a prelude to a new exploration frontier. This increased the cargo substantially and the logistical challenge of getting it all safely delivered.
Every trip out of Hay River is a different draft. You have to allow for wind and weather days, and each day the traffic coordinator in Hay River, he has to change his plans sometimes on a daily basis.
Most of my career I was a traffic coordinator, and that involved scheduling all the barges, all the cargo, and where was going where, and when was leaving, and which boats were dropping what barges, and where they were going. And I explained to my daughter when she asked me what I did, and I said, well, I go to work every morning and I lay out a plan. It's like a large checkerboard, and I put all the boats and all the barges and decide this is what we're going. And then when I go in next morning, take it and throw it in the air, set it down again and redo it, because every day was different. Every day something went wrong, something wasn't ready, the fuel wasn't there, the customer wasn't there to receive the fuel. It was never boring.
Then, in 1963, Ntcl delivered the first drill rig to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. Exploration activity continued to ramp up in both the Canadian and American Beaufort Sea, with Ntcl delivering both people and essential supplies. In 1972, to meet this growing demand and supply the proposed Mackenzie Valley Pipeline, Ntcl also built maintenance buildings and a rail transfer system. And that year, it shipped double the cargo it had handled 4 years earlier, a whopping 400,000 tons.
It was drilled into us in the marketing and traffic department. You never refuse cargo. And we had cutoff dates so that if you got your cargo to us by such and such a date, we guaranteed delivery. Well, nobody got it there when those dates, and they were coming late and late and late. It wasn't like you can say, well, I'll just add another trip, or I'll add another couple of barges, or because you couldn't. I mean, everything you had was full.
I remember mountains and mountains of cargo, train load after train coming in with 100 cars each, and you're wondering when this is going to stop.
I can remember walking out onto the island the 1st of September, and I know we've only got a month left. We got a month at the most of shipping out of Hay River. And I walk down to that island, and the minute I start to walk towards the cargo, I start to gag, because there is so much cargo. I mean, it's just piled high, and I know there's only 4 trips left, and we're never going to do it. It's just not going to go. And the foreman said to me, Cameron, you go back to the office for a couple hours and come back a little bit later. And I went back a little bit later, and they jammed it in somewhere. I don't know where. I still don't know where. Maybe they hid it. I don't know. But anyway, it got on. But it was hard.
Everyone from the forklift operators to the checkers to the foreman, marine crews knew they had to move so much cargo in a certain time, and it was the cooperation between all departments that got everything moving and delivered on time. It was just dedicated people.
By the mid-1970s, operations stretched to Churchill, Manitoba, and communities along the west coast of Hudson's Bay.
It was a special time for us because we were all sort of in our early 20s and we came from all over. And the word had spread across Canada that, listen, if you want a job, if you can get to Hay River, you're going to get work. You might be a laborer and you might be unloading cement or you might be doing this, but you're working and you're getting fed and you're earning a decent dollar. And so people came from all over. I worked 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day for the whole summer. And there was sort of a camaraderie that went with that. I mean, if you sort of survived a summer at working with Ntcl, it was sort of like going to war, you know? You felt like you had stories to tell. We had got some new tugboats, and the introduction of the 1000 series barges came in, and that was revolutionary because before they had just used the PMT boats, the smaller boats, and the 600 series barges. And so to get the Sherwood class or the Hall class boats and the 1000 series barges really opened up. I think that was probably the start of when we got the 40-ton forklifts, when we got the 200-ton cranes, and that was all in support of the oil industry because it was a big boom. I think that at that time was probably the first time in the company's history that I can remember was that actually the exploration activity sort of outstripped the resupply for the community.
In 1982, Ntcl received a challenging contract from Doyen Drilling at Prudhoe Bay.
They built a rig in Edmonton, dismantled it, moved it into Hay River with a couple of hundred trucks loads, put it together in Hay River. There was the drilling structure itself was one unit. The camp was another unit. And it was all self-propelled. The largest piece being, I think it was like 1,230 tons. Down the Mackenzie across to Prudhoe Bay, and about 30 hours after it arrived at Prudhoe Bay, it was drilling.
A few years later, Eldorado Nuclear, originally Eldorado Mines, and once the parent company of Ntcl, shut down its uranium mines in the Athabasca region. The tugs and barges were portaged at Fort Smith for the last time, and Ntcl turned the page on another chapter.
Yeah, we've been through a few booms and busts. I came here just in '75, and it was after the big boom in '73 when these vessels were first built in anticipation of the pipeline then. And it's gone up and down with exploration and dew line and cleanups.
If there was an operation going on anywhere that we could go to, we'd be in there like a dirty shirt trying to get some business.
In 1985, ownership of Ntcl came home to the people of the North. The Inuvialuit Development Corporation and Nunisi Corporation purchased Ntcl from the Government of Canada.
The people of the North were selected because they would have control on the essential resupply to their communities.
Transportation is so important in the Arctic, and Ntcl was servicing all the Arctic from Churchill to the Western Arctic, and we felt that given the relationships that could be built on the longer term, that it was a perfect opportunity.
Inuit are known to be a team, and we always work together when we see a benefit. We have high expectations for these kind of companies to grow and maximize their business opportunity and potential.
The ownership of Ntcl is strategic, and our ownership views Ntcl as critical in the ongoing success of their communities.
And that was very beneficial for the company. That really solidified our northern connection. Everything we did was north of the 60th parallel, so for us to be located in Edmonton and have Ottawa bosses and things like that, it didn't make any sense. And they were also very helpful for us when we go to bid something where Aboriginal ownership could be the difference between whether we get the contract or not. I mean, the big emphasis was, of course, on hiring beneficial shareholders, and that only made sense.
Ntcl exists for three reasons. First, it's for strategic resupply to the communities along the Mackenzie River, across the Western Arctic, and into the Kivalliq region. Secondly, it's to generate profit for the beneficiaries of the ownership group that span across the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. Thirdly, Our mandate includes the creation of meaningful employment and career opportunities for our beneficiaries.
And to honor Inuit and Inuvialuit leaders, Ntcl renamed several of its tugs. And the head office was officially moved from Edmonton to Hay River in 1995. Ntcl was recognized as the Northwest Territories Business of the Year. It also received the Human Resources Development Canada Certificate of Merit Award for achievements in employment equity. Ntcl continued to adapt to the North's changing needs by converting its shipyard into a fabrication assembly line.
It's like the story of the North. I mean, it never dies simply because if the gold mines die in Yellowknife, they find diamonds.
It constructed 23 large fuel tanks for Diavik diamond mines, which were transported over Winter Road on Great Slave Lake and the Lupin Winter Road to the mine site. The new millennium also saw the resurrection of the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline project. In anticipation of a pipeline, oil and gas companies began exploring and drilling along the Mackenzie Valley, in the Delta, and shallow Beaufort Sea. Once again, Ntcl's tugs and barges were instrumental in supplying their activities. Riding this wave, Ntcl began to explore new ways to generate year-round revenue.
We suddenly realized that these were boats that could operate anywhere in the world. So we can either tie them up or we can take them out and put them to work.
In February 2005, we started the East Coast operations, primarily with the focus of looking back at the Eastern Arctic in particular. Sailing in the Kivalik region, we started with 1 tug and 1 barge. This year, we'll have 7 tugs, 10 barges, a dry cargo ship, and a tanker in the region.
It is the task of Ntcl to continue with these essential services to the community, which have always been the backbone of our business, and expand our services based on the knowledge derived from that operation to a diversified marine transportation company that offers services to a wide range of customers and clients.
So we've taken a northern expertise and brought it south. The gold rushes that happen throughout the Arctic today are happening off the East Coast. We cover the whole eastern seaboard, eastern Arctic, and the U.S. Gulf and South America, right in the North Sea. Harbor operations with refueling daily. So if I can look at an operation that I'm willing to transit 45 days to the Canadian Beaufort via Panama, what part of the world wouldn't I travel to go to work?
Ntcl is also preparing to deliver the world to the oil sands.
The development of Fort McMurray represents a huge opportunity for Ntcl. Ntcl, with its partner, Mammoet, have been developing a northern route, which essentially sees modules arriving at the mouth of the Mackenzie River from virtually anywhere in the world, and then transported south along a river and lake system into Fort McMurray.
And in 2005, Ntcl successfully moved fuel along the West Coast using a chartered tug and barge. After repeating this success for 3 more seasons, and seeing the potential to move dry cargo from the West Coast, Ntcl purchased a 3rd Arctic Class II icebreaking tug and built a new 12,000-ton barge.
That will see a single lift barge making 1 single trip into the communities, designed to A, ensure consistent, timely, and reliable service, and B, at the lowest possible cost.
So what necessarily happened yesterday won't happen tomorrow, but it will still be, it'll still have that Ntcl mystique and tradition with it, whether it comes from Vancouver or it comes out of Hay River.
Since its inception 75 years ago, Ntcl has been through it all: booms and busts, war and peace.
When something's dying, something else is growing, sort of thing, eh? So they still keep going.
One thing Ntcl has always been able to do is respond to the market. They've recognized when they had to change.
No matter what our captains and crews have encountered, they have always known that our owners and customers are counting on them to deliver.
We all had a share in this, and we all wore this, and we just had to make it work. And sometimes some people were called upon, particularly the vessels at the end of the season.
The people at Ntcl are special. They step up.
I just like the river, like the job.
I guess I used to think of it as my company.
I've enjoyed every year on the boat, and that's why I still go back, is because I like it. I don't know, it gives you a sense of pride. You know, you say you taking barges down rapids and this kind of stuff, and there's a lot of guys that can, but there's a lot of guys that can't. So you do this and you feel good about yourself, you know what I mean? I don't know, I do anyway. I don't know, maybe that's wrong, but I feel like I've accomplished something, you know?
I am most proud of the fact that we at Ntcl, in a very short time frame, have transitioned from being a tug and barge company providing services across the Arctic to being a marine transportation provider that utilizes the equipment that best suits the needs of our client base, whether they be community or project cargo.
The real success for me, though, is that we've changed the nature of people's belief in what they can do.
And that's what we're trying to be, more than just a company that makes a profit. We want to be an employer who cares about people, cares about where we operate, and that's why I do believe people truly enjoy coming to work for us.
The bigger the organization has become, the more momentum it has to continue to grow and expand. So we'll be moving stuff all over and building things and doing neat stuff and creating employment for people for years and years to come.